Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where we're talking about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Prodigal Son. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with Martin. Obviously, he's got the good news of, because I've been kind of, doing good, been on good behavior, kind of good behavior, they're giving me a job now. He's like, I'm getting, I'm going to be working in, because his initial thought was he's thinking I'm going to be working in the medical place and I'm going to be, I'm going to be able to put my surgeon skills to the test. I'll be getting paid $3.26 an hour. But it's but it'll be good, to get back to work and use his skills and everything. But sadly, when he gets there, it turns out, he's just mopping and cleaning the place. Because you're a serial killer. Do you think we're really going to let you continue practicing? It's why didn't they revoke your practice? Which he was they did revoke my license, but still, I know he can't stop what he knows and being really good at what he knows and does. What surprised me, because I saw her name in the opening credits, I was like, wait, did that just say what I think it is? I had to rewind the episode. It said special guest star Catherine Zeta-Jones. I was like, what? Because I think I'm still stuck in that fashion of still that separation of TV acting and movie acting, which it's a very antiquated thought process. But I mean, that's a antiquated thought process that Hollywood had for a long time of if you're a movie actor, you don't go to TV. It was started that way, but obviously it's changed over the years where it's no, the lines blur a lot. Obviously, for some people, it's not as blurry because they're just kind of network television. It still kind of has a little bit of that stigma for some people. But, yeah, I mean, I don't know, because I don't know if I've ever seen her do any television act. I'm not well-versed in her entire filmography, but I've always just known her to be in movies. So for her to be a TV show, I was that's so dope. Once again, the lines blur so much because obviously, for some people, it's what is Netflix? Netflix is, TV, but also, those lines kind of blur. Regardless, I was just holy shit, Catherine Zeta-Jones, dude, that's so wild, that's sick. And she was her Dr. Capshaw. Not the biggest fan of Dr. Whitley. It's come over here and clean these bedpans. He's well, can I get a butterscotch? She's no, clean these so good that you can eat off the bedpans. I'm wow, you're kind of mean. But it turns out they're trying to help that patient. Which, side note, I could be mistaken. Isn't that the actor who I think he's in season 3 and 4. Well, he's in 4 a little bit, but he's in season 3 of Banshee. Isn't that the jackass? Isn't that the actor who plays the jackass in Banshee who kidnapped Joe? Spoilers. Sorry. I think that's I could be mistaken. It might look like that might not be him, but obviously, I love the whole thing of Martin trying to analyze him, and it's do you exercise or something like that? He's what are you hitting on me? He's trust me, dude, you're not my type. But he's trying to figure out. He's with their muscle size and everything, you should be more vascular. He's I am vascular. He's okay, obviously you don't know what vascular means, but it turns out that he's there's an issue with his head, and Martin basically helps Dr. Capshaw through it, the process, figuring everything out. And it's we're going to have to drill into his head and everything. And then immediately when it was all said and done, it's Martin's leading, and he's oh my God, look, we did it. Oh, it was amazing, right? And then she's send Dr. Whitley away. But the look on her face, I was are you kind of impressed or whatever? But then later on, it's you underestimated me, Dr. Whitley. And she crosses the line, and he's well, you underestimated me too. And then she ends up handing him something. I was is she going to? I was wait, what? And it turns out to be a candy. My initial thought was, are we going to find out that she's actually a fangirl? Maybe this whole thing was an excuse. Maybe she's the one that kind of pushed for it and trying to play. Maybe this is kind of her playing a little cat and mouse, Maybe this is her way to get closer because maybe she's, because there was that sad and twisted thing where, there are people who fall for serial killers. That's obviously a whole thing. There are plenty of serial killers, and well, not just within the confines of the show, because obviously the show kind of pulls from real serial killers, because obviously had a whole that whole thing with Malcolm at the beginning from 2015, whole back row of them. I'm pretty sure the last one they show, I don't remember the person's real name, but it's who Charlize Theron played in the movie Monster. I think that was the last picture. I've seen fragments of the movie Monster. I've never seen it all the way through, but obviously it's based on isn't Eileen? Is that the woman's real name? I don't remember her last name, but I believe it's Eileen. I could be, like I said, I could be making it up, but I think that's who that was supposed to be the last picture of. Could be mistaken, because Regardless, I'm going on a tangent that's not necessarily important, but I was wondering whether she's kind of a fangirl and that's what that was about, or is it just because on some level she liked, like, maybe it's kind of showcasing that maybe she was already a little, something's not 100% right about her, and spending time with Whitley actually made it go, ooh, like like the fact is to see that you're still on top of your game, and I don't know, man. That's going to be interesting if they set that up, because it could be a thing of she could end up helping Dr. Whitley escape, and it could be like almost like a Bonnie and Clyde thing, but it's like, oh, who's more like me than my son is? Ainsley. Like, that was my thought process of that when it was all said and done, like, eventually he might escape and go on the run with Ainsley. That's kind of been my thought about potentially where things could go, but I'm like, especially if they're on the run together, like, that turned into something really interesting. If it was kind of like a pseudo family on the run. Or it might be a situation of he plays into this and she's really all down for it until at the end is like she helps him escape and thinks it's going to be happily ever after, and he ends up killing her at the end of things, or Ainsley does. We'll have to wait and see. I'm curious to see where that storyline goes, but like I said, I don't know whether that's something. I'm about to say I don't know if that's something I'm reading too much into, but it's like, there's no reading too much into that. It's just wondering at what point was it like, is she fangirling out? Was it just kind of the time she spent with him? It's just, because it's like, despite everything, like, oh, he did a great job and everything, but he's still the surgeon who's killed 23 people, you know? But it's like, so you had to come into this with something like already there, and you just wanted to test him a little bit, like, you know, I get the feeling. Very like, spoilers for you, kind of a season 2 situation. I'll leave it at that. A certain thing is season 2, maybe we're kind of building something there, which would be wild and insane if we're going use season 2 with this. That'd be insane. Regardless, tangents aside. So there's that side of things. What's also interesting too is, hey, Aunt Bertie stops by. And I think this is fascinating because this is our first time meeting extended family. Not on the Whitley side of things, because we haven't even touched that really, but now on Jessica's side of things, because this is her little sister, and her little sister's kind of been away, and it's like, oh, like, I was stuck on a yacht all quarantined. Oh, woe is me. I'm back. Oh, I want to be with my family. Which obviously her showing up is always kind of an issue, especially for Jessica. It's like, this is the worst time with everything going on with the family, going on specifically with Ainsley. We don't really need this, but it's dinner. Ainsley's there. That's a whole thing we'll be getting into later, but obviously, like, she's very, like, she talks a lot of mad shit, because she was talking about the fact is, going from major crimes to the FBI, isn't that a bit of a demotion? He's like, well, if we all took 10 years in between our attempts at a career, the family trust would kind of run out. And Jessica kind of laughs. I remember the snide comment she made. She's like, oh, looking more like your father every day. It was like, that, Ainsley's kind of laughing about it, but it's like, that was a dick thing to say, especially what she says later on makes you go like, yeah, I can't. We'll get to it soon enough. But she was taking digs at Malcolm, and you know, also the thing is like, oh, if your father find out, you know, my father was a serial killer and blah blah blah, you know, I wouldn't want to get too close to, you know, working on cases. But for him, it's like, I save, you know, because the difference is I'm able to save people. I'm able to save all of them. And then Ainsley adds in most of them. And obviously, Bertie's kind of picking up on it. And obviously, so is Jessica about, like, there being some animosity there, that there's something there. But Bertie's like, oh, you let me confide in you. You can confide in me. I've heard about what, you know, not only what you went through with Martin, but also Nicholas, like, that's why I'm here, to talk to you. And be like, the moment she started talking like that, and like, oh, being there for her, I was thinking like, you're recording this, like somebody set you up to, like, you're trying to get this story or something, which to a certain extent that was the case. But it turns out she's writing a book. She was offered money, she's run out of money, and she talks about the fact is that their mom, which obviously we've kind of set up, they brought it up last season, and obviously it doesn't come up too much, but obviously, like, prior to meeting Martin, she comes from a very well-off family. We've kind of dabbled in that. We've just never gone too deep in it. But it's like, obviously for her, it's like their mom cut her off. And it's like, all right, so I could pay you and then we'll be fine. I'll offer you more money than the book people are going to. It's like, yeah, but if it's not me, they're going to find someone else to write the story. So Jessica's like, fine. To kind of control the narrative of the situation, she'll hand over her memoir, and it's like, that way my advance I will give to you. And it's like, oh, that's cool. But at the end of the day, it's like, also when you talk to mommy again, like, it's like, dinner was perfect, it was great. So it's like, obviously they're both kind of lying to their mom, which I'm like, okay, so eventually she might pop up in the story. We kind of figured out what it, but I think that's also kind of supposed to stem from probably like their mom probably has like very high expectations. So it's like Jessica kind of has to live a certain lifestyle, make everything seem okay, because the last thing she wants is her mom to worry, because maybe her mom is very caring and concerning, or maybe it's just a thing of her mom will show up and be like, oh, I told you so, yada, yada, yada. I know what's best for you, daughter, type of thing. Who knows? I think this is what they're potentially setting up. And talking about her mom introducing her sister like that, it seems like we might be getting more on the on Jessica's side of the family, which would bring a very interesting dynamic to the show. But this particular episode, Malcolm's got to balance not only working on a case, but also trying to figure out the whole thing with Ainsley. And obviously the victim in this episode is a plastic surgeon, Nicole Jean, which I also love when they get there. It's like, he's asking Adrisa, it's like, oh, just one murder today? It's like, oh, what, one's not good enough for you more? And then Malcolm was like, oh, Adrisa, can I ask you for something? Like, can I come over tonight? And she's like, yes. And then, like, JT's like, he didn't even say a time. And it's like, oh, yeah, like, after work. And she's like, it's a date. And you're like, oh, Dad, that's so adorable. And even Danny kind of giving her a look like, oh. And Adrisa's like, right, got to get back. Because he's like, shouldn't we get back to JT's like, we need to get back on this, get rid of, like, steer away from all that and focus on the murder. And Adrisa's like, right. So it turns out that Nicole was literally Botoxed to death. Because obviously her whole thing about, making, plastic surgery and stuff like that, and someone made her disfigured in the end. It was meant to be kind of almost like a poetic justice of like, they were disfigured, whether they really were or whether they just felt like that on the inside. That's kind of where this case kind of stems from. And they end up meeting, her two former associates or whatever. And I even love later on, you had because at first and foremost, when they go to the office and everything, it's like, oh, Jenny was like, oh, I'm kind of feeling a bit insecure. He's like, honestly, that's the purpose of this place. It's supposed to make you feel like you're not good enough, but it's like, he was basically saying, like, you don't have to worry about it. Someone as beautiful as you are. And you're like, the look on her face, like, oh, look at you. You're like, I had to rewind it, because I was like, oh, that was smooth, because he wasn't like trying to say a line or whatever. He was just, I think just he got caught up in the moment. He just said something, and she just kind of was looking at him. He's looking like, what? She's like, what? Nothing. It's like, oh, it's like, because he didn't even realize like what he had said and what that kind of meant, like him to say that. It's like, oh, look at you. That's it. She's super adorable. And like, I love her, like, that little, like, oh, that sweet, that smile she had was kind of like, oh, that's sweet, Malcolm. I thought that was so good. But also I was like, the main dude is like, oh, he's kind of a douche. Because even Danny was like, I kind of want him to be the bad guy. He's like, yeah, some guy that says, work hard, play hard, definitely has a coke problem. I love that. Turns out to be the case. We'll get to that later. But, so they're trying to figure this whole thing out, because obviously it's like he's the more toxic person, but it's like the other dude's kind of I forgot the terminology Malcolm used, but basically it was like a complimentary like masculine, like basically his masculinity comes from like latching on to someone that's kind of like an alpha. And it's like, well, how about the way we'll get him to talk and tell us the quote-unquote ugly truth is to get him in a room with two alphas of our own, and that ended up being JT and Gil. And I love that, them kind of staring him down and JT kind of scaring him a little. He's like, all right, fine, I'll tell you everything. But because it turns out there's someone, Francine, she got a whole bunch of surgeries. This is kind of connected to Zhang and the others. And Malcolm and Danny actually go visit her, which is kind of like we need to see face to face, and you're like, whoa, that's the dark side of plastic surgery, because usually it stems from your dysmorphia. It stems from you seeing something that's not necessarily there, because sometimes like. It becomes, as they talk about in this episode, it becomes addictive that, every little flaw, you're like, oh, I want to be more and more perfect. It's like, oh, this is wrong. But then later on you realize, oh, no, this is wrong and this is wrong. It's a slippery slope that it's like, oh, that could be extremely dangerous. And obviously we see Francine's on that side of things, so they keep going more and more and more. But basically it turns out Francine is benefiting from the whole situation, because they will hook her up with what she needs to keep up her surgeries and stuff like that, even though they kind of distance themselves from her. if she keeps quiet about the whole Lana thing, which was a young, I think, surgeon. She was very talented, but the main dude like got in her head about like, oh, but if you look extra beautiful, like you'd make it even further. So he's like, oh, some cheekbone stuff, it'll be fine. He was inexperienced and he disfigured her, and basically she kind of disappeared after that. So he kind of ruined her life to a certain extent. So now it seems like Lana might be the one responsible. Which obviously this whole case is kind of driving Malcolm insane because the whole Ainsley thing, which even has Danny being like, what's bothering you? You know, like, you can talk to me. Because it's like, because she was trying to say, like, you know, as someone who's kind of going through their own troubles, just be there for her, but don't try and be, like, overbearing. Which almost like borderline saying, like, don't be too, like, controlling and stuff like that, which is kind of interesting in the long run, but, you know, we'll circle back to that. But it's kind of like, he's like, but what if I'm, don't know. I'm wrong. It was, no matter, like, when you're trying to help someone, just don't let them drag you down. He's like, but what if I already have? And she's like, what? Malcolm, you can talk to me. And he was like, you know what? I'm just overthinking things. Because the thing is, he would confide in Danny. Because also, let's not forget, he didn't tell Danny about his dream world. And what that necessarily all entailed. He, you know, because he's like, oh, she was like, how different, what was I like in your dream world? And he never went into the whole, oh, actually we were dating thing. So, you know. Which also, let's talk about him visiting Adrisa, like her getting prepared and everything. I was like, look at her, oh my god, she got the rose petals on the slab and everything. She's like, oh yeah, sorry about like the cadaver smell in here. And like, oh, he's like, you look nice. And she's like, this? It's like, oh, it's in the back of her drawer and you see the tag and she's trying to hide it. She's like, yeah, thanks for saying I look nice. I do look nice. And it's like, he's like, I actually have a favor to ask you. She's like, anything, whatever you want. And it's like, oh, can you run this for me? It's, something on the side, like, so you just keep this between you and me. And she's like, yeah, sure. And it's like, oh, something with Ainsley. He was like, how do you know? She's like, oh, I'm very good at reading stuff upside down. I was like, I hope that was not incriminating in those text messages. It might have been, but hopefully, you know, because obviously someone might decide to search your phone, so you probably don't want those texts kind of like, so you probably kept it super cryptic. But I love Adrisa kind of smiling at me, and she's like, that went well. Like, yeah, that was good. That was good. I was like, Adrisa, I love you so much, dude. I love her so much. Keiko, the actress who plays her, she's just so amazing, dude. I'm going to be excited to see her and just everything else she ever does, like, you know, anything she's done before the show, anything she does after the show. I'm always going to be like, it's Keiko, it's the actress who plays Adrisa. Dude, I like I said, I can't help it. I love Adrisa so damn much, dude. She's one of my favorite characters because she's like the most adorable human being ever. She's adorableness put in an amazing inside of an amazing person. That's just, I get too giddy about it. Sorry. But aside from all that, this sad thing about this case, because we end up finding out that it would be easier if it was the douchebag doctor. Well, first, I didn't talk about the fact that they had to save that other doctor dude because, like, it's like, well, we don't have a lot of time, so we need to get his heart pumping to kind of fight back against the toxins long enough. And it's like, oh, we need cocaine because it turns out, hey, a douchebag doctor dude's got some. And it's like, oh, is that how'd you know there was some in there? It's like, oh, he was fiddling with it. Plus, what else are you going to hide in a cheetah or whatever? So mix in a little coke, put in some saline. And did you find that other ingredient I needed? No. Is that bad? No, I got this order. It's like, will that help? It's like, well, it'll prevent him from getting worse, you know, because it would have been basically, this could be too much and it could kill him. It's like, this could kill him. It's like, yeah, I mean, he's going to technically die anyway. So, and you know, they go for it and it looks like, oh, did it work? And luckily it did, and they both kind of pass out, fell backwards because they were both exhausted because they were just so tense from the situation. And I love that, like, you know, Danny was like, yeah, this makes me not miss drugs at all, you know, so. And obviously Gil truced him out about it later on. He was like, come on, I was sure, you know, 72%. You know, it's like, you know, obviously more and more of his behaviors continuing to be drastic. Even, like, obviously he was very drastic in season 1, but I think it's kind of kicked in overdrive a bit. I mean, at the same time, I still kind of feel like it is somewhat on par with a lot of his behavior in season 1 as well. But to be fair, that's kind of the problem. He was dealing with the whole nightmares, woman in a trunk situation, that was kind of driving a lot of his erratic behavior, plus just everything he's dealing with on a natural, normal basis. So kind of a similar thing of like that's gotten replaced with this whole Ainsley thing, because he's stressing out most of the episode not knowing where she was, until he finds out like, oh, you're posting up at the family, like you're supposed to leave this up to me, let me try to figure everything out, don't do anything, just let me handle it. But when it's all said and done, it turned out the one responsible for all this was Lana, and it turns out to be Summer. Because she wanted them to feel the pain she does, because she's not disfigured on a physical sense. It's actually on like a nerve or something had been cut, and that basically because of it, she's got this condition where it basically just feels like she's in like constant surges of pain under her face, like under her skin or whatever. So it's like that's what she wanted them to feel, pain. That's why she wanted them to, because obviously they're the ones that kind of pushed her. In particular, Home Dude is the one who kind of pushed for her to get the surgery, and that led to this pain she's always in. So she wanted them to feel a fraction of the pain that she's feeling all the time, which Malcolm kind of talks her down of like, obviously, to get back at him, let him live. You see what you've done to him, make him basically live every day not being able to see, not being able to recognize himself in the mirror, which obviously he's talking about himself as well, because he doesn't even recognize himself anymore, because he's crossed so many lines that he never would have crossed before in an effort to protect his sister. And so he realizes, like, he's like, oh, like, that was the best revenge. And I thought it's an interesting twist when we find out where he's like, it's all about revenge. And I was like, the moment he's saying that, I was like, no, it can't be. And he confronts Ainsley about it at the end. It turns out, yes, she faked everything. I was like, that's effed up. I guess at some point she figured it out herself. So she basically wanted to make Malcolm squirm. It's like, I guess she's a reporter, so it probably didn't take too much for her. Like, I doubt all her memories came back, or maybe they did. But, maybe she was actually surprised to find out that he told her. Like, maybe she wasn't expecting it. But I think that proves an interesting thing, that even though he told her, she could have been like, oh, never mind, it's nothing. She went through with it anyway, just to prove a point. Because for her, it's about, oh, you're controlling me. And because what did he do the entire episode? He tried to control her. It's like, tell her to stay here. Don't do anything. Let me handle it. So for her, it's like, you're just proving my point. But for him, it's like, you see what I went through, like the hell you put me through because of this. She's like, but what about what you put me through, lying to me and everything? But for him, it's like, I've been trying to protect you. It's like, no, you're just trying to control me. It's like, he's like, it's not like that. And she's like, yeah, that's something Dad would say, which I think that was really messed up of her to say. But even Malcolm's like, but do you realize, like, she's like, the fact is, she's like, oh, it's kind of fun. It's a little funny. Like, the fact is she's looking at it from that perspective. He's like, don't you recognize, like, how kind of psychotic that is? Because this is also folds into the conversation about the conversation he was at Quantico talking about in 2015 about how it's the second kill. Someone, there can be extenuating circumstances that lead someone to murder, but it's always kind of a thing of anyone can murder one time because extenuating circumstances, whether it be crime of passion, this or that, like there can be extenuating circumstances that led someone to commit murder once. Being a serial killer is on a whole other level. It's like, now that second kill, like once you get a taste for it, that's when things kind of really shift. So obviously we're starting to see more so dark side Ainsley. It's not just like, oh, like she's blacking out and doing it. It's like the fact is she did something elaborate and as messed up as this, because it was like, oh, just having fun. I was messing with you. It was kind of me teaching you a lesson. It's like, this is an effed up way to go about teaching someone a lesson. And just the look on her face, it's like, oh, she looks super unhinged. It's like, you know what your brother's been dealing with. He tried to protect you and everything. Even saying the line of, don't, because she's like, don't worry, we're not going to get caught. He's like, but how do you know? We might. And it's like, she's like, no, we're the Whitleys. When it comes to murder, like, we're too good at this or something like that. And you're like, there is definitely, like, Ainsley's broken, Killing Endicott awakened something that was probably, like I keep bringing up. Season 1, we definitely saw the dark side of Ainsley to begin with. And we peeked into what's there. Malcolm has that darkness, but I think his darkness, there's a lot more light there. I think Ainsley, like, she's gotten a taste for that dark side, and I think we're going to see it kind of unravel more and more. Like, that's why I just get the feeling like when we're going to see this at the end, Malcolm's not going to have any choice but to turn on Ainsley. I mean, because it's not just about protecting Ainsley anymore, and it's like, because I think it's going to get to a point where it's like, is it worth protecting Ainsley? And when she's my sister, it's my job as the older brother to protect her, but, you know, what she put me through, and it's like, and what did Danny say? Like, don't let them drag you down, and she kind of already has. Like, he's crossed a line that he isn't comfortable with in order to protect her, you know, so, which I'm sure the argument will probably be like, oh, you kind of wanted to do it on some level anyway. Like, obviously, Martin's kind of trying to lean into that. But I mean, like, oh, it felt good. You got away with it and everything. If he heard Ainsley talking like this, he'd probably enjoy it. Because I think she found a little kinship because she was talking about, like, oh, this is something Dad would do, because I think she was reading, like, obviously a lot of his notes. So I think she's kind of starting to understand her dad on a more personal level, because I think she's kind of going through that metamorphosis herself. So that's definitely going to be something to watch out for. So, but at the end, we see that Endicott's body was, in particular his head, and I saw his name in the opening credits. I was like, I haven't seen him, and there's like, there he is at the very end of the episode, Alan coming. I was like, yo, that's so dope. Which is interesting when you think about it, this being on Fox, because what was also a part of Fox at one point in time, X-Men, and he was Nightcrawler, and like, I think he was only in, maybe he was in the third one, but I think he was only in the second one as Nightcrawler. Maybe he was in the third X-Men. I know X-Men 2, X-Men United, but I don't remember if he was in The Last Stand or not. Maybe he was, I don't remember. Because the later versions of him is obviously from the 80s, and it's a younger version of the character. But it was like, oh, it's freaking Alan Cumming. And I was like, holy crap. And he's investigating the Endicott thing, and he realizes, like, oh, like, it's supposed to be made it look like he was murdered here in Estonia, but it's like, no, they just made it look like that because of these freezer burns. You can tell it was just meant to look like his body was frozen to fit like it was here in Estonia. But it's like, oh, I'm going to New York, so all that, you know, the irony behind Ainsley, like, oh, we got away with it, it's fine. And it's like, oh, here's a new detective looking into things, which we might have a situation where Ainsley's like, might not have any choice, might have to kill him. And he, you know, you'll probably have Malcolm's like, what? She's like, I'm kidding. It's like, no, probably doesn't sound like it. Like, she, maybe even Martin might be starting to suggest, this cop's asking too many damn questions. Because eventually, like, I think Gil and Danny might be the ones that kind of figure, either one of them might, I think maybe even Danny might be the one to figure things out first. Jesus, I hope that doesn't turn into a sad situation like that where she starts looking into things too deeply and Ainsley decides, like, oh, like, Danny's got to be removed from the equation, which obviously, like, she means a lot to Malcolm. So it might be a thing of who you're going to protect, your sister or the woman that you definitely have a thing for. Like, you know, so, or what's more important, doing the right thing and following the law or protecting your family? We've seen where you cross that line to protect your family, but at the end of the day, it's like, maybe Malcolm's going to regret that, and it's like, maybe this time I need to go full-blown law. I don't know. At the end of the day, I feel like we might, at the end of all of this, wherever things necessarily go, maybe the end result might actually be with Ainsley locked up. So the only two people remaining in the family is Jessica and Malcolm, and they have to kind of live with just kind of like how messed up that family is and how messed up it continues to be. I don't know. We're talking about storylines that will probably not come up until like the very, very end of the season. It's going to be built up over the course of the season. Some of the stuff I'm suggesting might not be until if the show gets a third season, or like a potential third season, like might be some of that stuff I'm kind of considering and throwing out there. But I'm very, very interested to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Especially with the whole thing with Jessica and the memoir. Like, oh, what's that going to look like? Like, you know, what she's going to include in it and how everyone's going to react, whether it's Ainsley, Malcolm, or Martin. Because for him, it's going to be like, whoa, like you're depicting me in the book like I'm an animal or something. It's like, you are. It's like, oh, come on. So I can already imagine a conversation like that. But like I said, it's going to be interesting to see where this all takes us. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.